covering the community, events, and people of Georgia, Carolina. This is the Means Report. Here is Brad Means.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Means Report. We appreciate you spending part of your Sunday with us. Hope that your post-school season is off to a great start. I know that we have a lot of exciting broadcasts planned for the summer months and beyond, so we appreciate you tuning in as much as you can. A busy agenda here on the Means Report as usual. Today we're going to cover two things that are near and dear to our hearts. The first one is eating disorders, and that topic is near and dear to our hearts because it's been in the news so much lately. We finally thought, you know what? We need to do an entire broadcast, or at least the better part of one, on eating disorders to find out what they are and what kind of help and treatment might be available right here in the CSRA, because we know that a lot of you are affected by eating disorders. Perhaps someone you love is, and so we have a great resource here on the set of the Means Report to help you. That's coming up in just a moment. And later, we're going to talk about the Ronald McDonald House. Some exciting things are in store for that facility, a place that is a home away from home for so many, more than 600 families served last year. Now it's your turn to try to serve them as they move to a huge new phase in their existence, coming up on 30 years strong in the CSRA. Hard to believe. But first, back to eating disorders and body image that are so often linked. You know, it wasn't too long ago that a sports columnist in Texas referenced an Oklahoma City cheerleader. She cheers for that NBA team, and he questioned whether she was too, quote, chunky to cheer. And boy, did that cause controversy. Looks great, doesn't she? But he wondered if she was too big, questioning her body type, if it fit that stereotype, if you will, of what a cheerleader should look like. And right on the heels of that, there is this Abercrombie Fitch. You've passed it in malls across the country, sometimes with those suggestive posters hanging right there in the windows that you hide your children's eyes, perhaps, as you walk by. Well, now there's word that that company is no longer going to sell what I would call normal people's sizes. You have to be downright tiny to go into Abercrombie and fit into anything these days. Take a look.
At your nearest Abercrombie & Fitch, you can find shirtless salesmen and the latest distressed denim. But if you're looking for a women's extra-large blouse, you're out of luck. The trendy retailer's CEO doesn't want your business.
He's been very successful. He doesn't want anybody in the store that doesn't fit that cool, young, and sexy definition.
Robin Lewis is co-author of The New Rules of Retail. He says it's all part of CEO Mike Jeffries' master plan to cultivate what he considers cool. We visited the Abercrombie flagship store in New York City to get a closer look, to see if we could find something for the average woman, a size 14 in the U.S. But after scanning multiple shelves and racks, we found mostly double zeros and extra smalls, and a couple of large tops and size 10 pants. Salespeople there confirmed Abercrombie doesn't carry XL or XXL for women. A spokesperson for Abercrombie & Fitch declined to comment, but in a 2006 interview, CEO Jeffries told Salon magazine, "We go after the attractive all-American kid. A lot of people don't belong in our clothes, and they can't belong. Are we exclusionary? Absolutely."
He is a brilliant visionary, and he really crystallized this core consumer he was going after.
But Lewis says it's a model that may not fit the future. Plus-size shoppers now make up 67% of consumers.
I think young people, they want cool, but it is how they define it for themselves.
From Dove's Real Beauty campaign highlighting real women to H&M's inclusion of plus-size swimsuit model Jenny Runk, many other brands are embracing that individualism and making their clothes more accessible. For example, rival retailers H&M and American Eagle both carry sizes up to 16 and 18. The largest at Abercrombie & Fitch, a 10.
And so now we want to talk about how that's playing out here at home, what an expert in the field of eating disorders sees firsthand in his practice. And he's been kind enough to stop by the set of the Means Report today. He is Dr. Christian Lomond from Georgia Regents, a professor there and a psychologist by trade. Dr. Lomond, you deal with eating disorders every day of your practice, your career. First of all, thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Second of all, is there just one category when it comes to eating disorders? I was trying to think on the way over here, you know, all the different issues that have come up that could be called eating disorders. Does it all go under one umbrella, or are there several types?
Well, there's lots of feeding disturbances, but today we're talking about eating disorders which include anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and eating disorder, we call it not otherwise specified. So that's a group of people who are not meeting criteria for anorexia or bulimia but are exhibiting some of those symptoms. So basically 3 different varieties.
Let me start with perhaps where an eating disorder might start, and that is the media's portrayal of what it calls normal. And not even the media, perhaps, a corporation's portrayal of what it calls normal, as is the case with Abercrombie and Fitch. Can you define normal? You see a lot of people. What is normal, say, for a woman when it comes to size and or weight?
So for a woman in the United States, the average woman is between 5'4" and 5'5", so not 5'10" or 11 like you see in models.
Right.
And the average weight is between 145 and 155, so again, not 5'11", 118 or something like that.
Do you agree, or do you believe that young girls and women see images like we just saw and say, I have to be like that, and that leads to problems?
Well, there's a segment of the population that's more adversely affected by that than others. I mean, there are some folks who can look at a billboard or watch a TV show or a movie or go into a store and find fewer clothes, fewer sizes or varieties of foods to choose from in their sizes and not be adversely affected by that. But then there's another segment of the population who might be more affected by that, and those are the kind of folks we typically see.
Well, is there anything we can do to keep them from ever coming to your office? Is it all about self-esteem and building them up before they go and see those shelves with nothing for them on them?
Well, I mean, eating disorders are multifactorial in their cause, and that's what makes them so fun and interesting for me to work with, but also very challenging too. And there's clearly a biological component, there's a genetic component, there's a psychological component, and then of course the media influences that too, as you just said. So it looks like we're focusing more on that right now. A lot of the girls and women that I see are adversely affected by what their perception of society expects them to be. And so when they don't feel like they meet up to those standards, that can cause them to resort to dieting practices, which, as we all know, losing weight can be difficult. Losing weight and keeping it off is even more difficult than losing it. And then resorting to unhealthy measures to keep that weight off or to lose it to begin with. And so that would include things like harsh restrictive dieting, which then creates a deficit state. We can't go without food. We need food just like our cars need gas. And when you create a deficit state, then that may lead to further overeating when you're finally letting yourself eat, or potentially something more pathological, binge eating, which we can talk about too. And then I have other patients who then compensate for the overeating and binge eating by using laxatives, throwing up, taking diuretics, using diet pills, engaging in excessive exercise, and those kinds of behaviors, which can be unhealthy.
Well, so how do you promote a healthy relationship with food? How do you break that cycle and say, okay, here's how you need to be? It's got to be, guessing, pretty intense therapy.
It can be, but I mean, I think it all starts, you're sort of asking about prevention too, and so I mean, it starts at home. And so we as parents need to model appropriate eating for our children. We need to teach our kids that there are some foods that are more healthy than other foods, but I really try to get people to stay away from saying things are bad for you. All foods are okay in moderation. But I think where we get into trouble is by suggesting to someone that they can't have a certain food because it's not the best nutrition, it doesn't have the best nutritional value for you.
Right.
And so what that can lead to then is sneaking when nobody's looking to get those foods, and then eating them quickly and not eating them in moderation, and then you just get this vicious cycle going.
But Dr. Lomond, how, other than saying, trust your mom, trust your dad, that's not the greatest food for you, or trust us when we say practice moderation. How can you get that message across to a young person right there at the home if they really want that food?
Well, no, it's the same. You can have the food. There's nothing wrong with eating.
They really want a ton of it.
No, you don't want it. If you want a ton of it, there's something else going on.
Okay.
Typically. It's because you haven't let yourself had any of those foods, or a lot of my patients, it's not just about body image, they're eating in response to their emotions. What we know about depression is that people either lose their appetite or their appetite increases, okay? And depression runs really hand in hand with eating disorders. And so what we have is folks who are turning away from food or turning to food in response to their emotions, and they find a way to regulate their emotions, if you will, by eating or not eating. A lot of my patients talk about how not eating and controlling their weight helps them to feel in control of the world around them that feels so out of control.
Okay, I see that.
And then when they overeat, then there's the need to compensate through an unhealthy measure such as purging, and that's when the vicious cycle gets going.
Well, where do you step in? What is involved? If somebody out there is watching and they say, okay, he is saying everything Dr. Lomond is saying is resonating with me. What's the first step to get help?
The first step is saying I need some help.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, eating disorders are people are hesitant to go see mental health personnel to begin with because there's such a stigma attached to that.
Right.
And so eating disorders or patients with eating disorders seem to be even more reluctant than other kinds of clients and patients that we see. There's a lot more shame and embarrassment connected to the process that they go through. And there's also this hesitancy because they don't want that to be taken away from them because that's how they're controlling things.
Right.
So the best thing to do is ask for help and to recognize that help is out there like you're trying to suggest today. And recognizing that you're not alone. Unfortunately, the numbers are quite high. I mean, what we know now is that, about anywhere, depending upon the population that you sample from, anywhere from 1 to 12% of our female population is affected by eating disorders. That's a lot of folks. So you're not the only one out there, and help is available. That's where to start first.
Can a primary care physician help? Is this something that he or she can spot?
Well, what's important to know is that I don't work unless I have a primary care physician helping me too.
Right.
I'm a psychologist, I'm a PhD, and I need medical backup because some of these behaviors and disorders are life-threatening. People can die from these kinds of behaviors. So yes, one thing that's great about Georgia Regents University and our medical school, the Medical College of Georgia, is that I am consistently educating the students there about how to spot these disorders. I also lecture in the dental school. You can tell a lot about a person by looking into their mouth.
You can, because a lot of that purging and throwing up will hurt your teeth.
Absolutely. And you can tell that you will see evidence of problems with the teeth within 6 months of throwing up.
What are some other signs and symptoms that either parents or primary care physicians can look out for, something that might be that red flag?
So let's talk about primary care physicians first, then we'll talk about parents.
Okay.
Primary care physicians need to be aware, and their staff, their support staff, need to be aware of significant changes in weight, either a decrease in the weight or an increase in the weight over time between checkups. Also can look for things like a low blood pressure, can look for a loss of a menstrual cycle in the female. Of course, not going to be the case in males, but the loss of the menstrual cycle. Thinning of the hair, scar tissue on the top of the first 2 fingers. Sometimes folks who make themselves throw up will actually scrape their teeth across their knuckles.
My gosh.
And so you may see signs like that. Someone in the house, this is not moving away from physicians now, a segue into parents. Your daughter typically, because it's typically girls, your daughter who's always cold and everybody else is saying, gosh, it's so hot in here. Because the loss of body fat takes away from your ability to regulate your temperature properly. Not wanting to be present for supper, not wanting to be present for any kinds of meals. Always, I'm busy, I'm doing my homework, I'll be down a little while, and they never come down.
Right.
Running off to the bathroom as soon as they get finished eating. Dramatic changes again in weight.
Once the warning signs are spotted, once the physician perhaps says it's time for a referral to the Dr. Lomonds of this world, what happens next? How long does this take? How difficult is it? How involved is the family?
Well, the thing about eating disorders is the more quickly we get someone into treatment, the better their prognosis is going to be. That's a much better chance of them getting well. And so if someone comes to my office that's only been doing this a month or so, and there's not a whole lot of other factors going on, then they're not going to be in treatment very long, maybe 3 to 6 months tops.
All right.
But if you have someone who's maybe our age, who's been doing this since they were teenagers, that can take quite a bit of time, and their prognosis is not nearly as good. Doesn't mean we can't help them, but it's going to probably be a more difficult road because it's so much a part of who they are, and they've probably been engaging in the behavior for 10, 15, 20 years.
This is a difficult question to ask as a layperson, but does it boil down to convincing that person that their behavior with the eating is not necessary to overcome whatever they're trying to overcome? Do you have to just kind of put that in the person's face?
Well, what I typically do when I'm working with eating disorder patients is I recognize, and I didn't know this when I was starting off in this field, but I recognize that I'm probably not going to be able to take those behaviors away from that individual. And so what we typically do is come to some sort of an agreement that we're not going to let the weight go any lower. If you become medically unstable, you're going into the hospital, those kinds of things. And then what we do is try to expand the problem and look at all the other issues that are contributing to that maladaptive way of coping.
Okay.
Much of what's going on here, in addition to all the body image problems that we just talked about, is that oftentimes these folks use these behaviors to regulate their emotions. So when you're stressed out, you've had a difficult day at work, you might go for a walk or go for a run, or you might call your spouse and say, gosh, I'm having a terrible day at work. You might engage in prayer, meditation, things like that. My patients, on the other hand, are either going to restrict their diet or conversely binge and purge when they're dealing with stress most often. And so we have to teach them other ways of identifying their feelings and then coping with their feelings in a more adaptive fashion in lieu of those behaviors that are unhealthy.
What about the belief that I'm going to stop this as soon as I get to my desired weight?
You know, I wish that was the case, but you know, I've had patients, you know, if I can think of worst case scenario, I had a woman one time who was 5'3.5" and weighed 52 pounds.
Oh my good night.
And she was not, 52 wasn't small enough for her.
Really?
Yes, and so, and in reality, the body can be incredibly resilient, but the body can also, you know, die just like that. And in fact, that woman did eventually end up dying after about 3 years of treatment. She was no longer working with me, but I could not convince her initially that what she was doing was unhealthy because she was walking around, she was living on her own.
Sure.
She had people who were providing a lot of things for her, and so she was comfortable in that existence, if you will. And so for me to just get in her face, so to speak, and convince her that everything she's doing is wrong would not be a good approach to take with her.
You know what, though? What I'm hearing from you is optimism, is hope that if we can put these folks in the right hands, like yours, that we can overcome these disorders in most, if not all cases. Isn't that true?
That's true. And I think where we, because I'm a parent too, make mistakes with our kids is having them tell us, I got this under control, I just need to lose 5 more pounds and then this will stop.
Right.
And invariably that doesn't work, and so what we need to do is take control of that, because what they're doing is out of control. And so we as physicians, as mental health personnel, as parents, as significant others, need to say that's enough. And sort of have an intervention like you would with someone who's struggling with a substance abuse problem and say, we're going to get you some help.
Right.
And you may hate me for this right now, but I'm confident that we'll figure this out eventually.
Boy, what a great approach. What a
Yeah.
great approach. I know we've whipped through your area of expertise in about 14 minutes, and I appreciate you rolling with that, but I do want to thank you for your time, and thank you for what you do for people.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Christian Lomond, go see him at Georgia Regents. Get your physician to give you that referral and help someone. Tell them it's time to stop this cycle. When we come back, we're going to talk Ronald McDonald House and how you can help that organization. You'll want to stay tuned for that. We'll be right back.